How we doing today, guys? It's Sam here, joined by Alex as always.
Hey,
So we
Dylan.
got all sorts of stuff going on. Fishing isn't quite dead or anything. There's still a lot of fish to be caught. So jumping into rockfish, there's a lot of big rockfish being caught down south towards, borderline Maryland, Virginia waters, all the way down through Virginia. These are some of the bigger fish. So if you do want to go out there and try trolling for them, some of your bigger baits like your 9-inch profiles, and go heavy too. Don't be afraid to go heavy, and you're going to add some weight to this. You want to get down towards that bottom, third of the water column at least. These are just some of your most popular ones. These are some really nice ones made by Hardhead. So you can catch them jigging too, Alex. What do you
Correct,
be using
yeah.
for those?
I mean, we're using some heavier jig heads. As you can see here, we got some Coach and GI jigs, anywhere from 1.5 ounces to 2 ounces. You are going to step up your profile baits for these bigger fish, and you're going to go up to that 8-10-inch profile like that. Not saying that they won't hit those 7-inch baits, but you definitely want to stay with those bigger profiles. You know what they say, big baits, big fish. Most of the guys are focusing on birds. If you're jigging, gotta search around. You might find them, might not, but electronics help a lot with also seeing what's down there and seeing if you have any good marks in the area. Even if you're staying closer to that point lookout area in the Potomac, there's a lot of mid-sized fish, 20 to 30-inch fish. But those bigger fish that we're talking about are those ocean migratory fish that are making their way in. Yeah.
So if you're out on the main stem, you really need to be moving around a lot. You don't want to stay in the same spot, and you're not looking for little birds. You're looking for big ones, gannets, pelicans, or stuff you're going to be able to see down that way. Fishing your big baits, they're chasing big bait. We're going to see bunker this time of year, full-size bunker. So you want to be fishing your bigger profiles like you see here. If you're going to be trolling, targeting your channel edges in deeper water more, hitting that 50, 60, 70-foot line sometimes. Your baits aren't going to be quite down that far, but you still want to gather around that depth. So that's probably going to cover it for most of what's going on with the rockfish, and there are quite a few down there. So why don't we go into a little more local stuff?
So we have a couple things going on locally. Either if you're fishing most of these local rivers here, or if you're fishing some of the lakes and ponds over in the eastern shore, and most of it is pickerel. I mean, that's our winter fishery that's kind of underrated, if you ask me.
For sure.
Numbers are still there. I think the quality of fish might be going down a little bit, but there's always plenty of fish to catch out there. Usually kind of, starts good, slows down a little bit, it comes back up later in February.
On the tributaries especially, this was kind of one of the tougher weeks we've had so far. However, that was because we had all that water coming down from the Conowingo, dirty water. So as the water continues to clear up over the next week or two, it should be getting a lot better. And
touching bases into that, when you do have dirty water, personally, for pickerel, it's almost like bass fishing. You want some vibration baits. You have these new jackhammer stealth baits that put out a little bit of vibration, but not too much. Smaller hook. They have the clear blade, so they don't add any flash. But other than that, a rattle trap. Classic. You're just jigging it. You're not gonna reel it in. You're gonna throw it out there and just kind of JoJo the actual bait around the pilings. And especially with this dirty water, you'll get them out of there and they'll commit to that bait.
And speaking of, not ideal water conditions, that's when we're going to start doing a lot more minnow fishing. With the water being so cold this time of the year, the fish aren't quite as active. Now, they still are going to be active considering they are cold water fish, but we're going to switch over to a lot more minnow presentations. And typically, we're either going to fish these with or without a bobber. The bobber is going to allow you to keep it more in a designated spot. So if you know that the fish have been in that area or you believe they're going to be in there, a bobber is a good way to go. However, if you don't, just fishing a little bit heavier jig than you would underneath of a bobber, something like you see down this way, tipping those with a minnow and just casting and retrieving them slowly along the bottom, moving it up through the water column can be super effective. You don't always have to have a bobber when you're picking fish.
Yeah, and one of those things like Sammy said, bobber fishing, everybody has their own personal preference on bobbers. I personally love slip bobbers just because you can adjust them in the depth. You can move them around and they'll actually jig that little jig on the bottom there up and down vertically. But the same technique now that we're speaking with the bobbers applies for anything in these rivers.
Absolutely.
You'll have yellow perch, some of these rivers, some largemouth, even crappie hit them. But yeah, it's a great technique. Never go wrong with maps. That's one of those lures where people ask me, what do you use for a pickerel? That's a classic one. It never
Absolutely.
fails. Other than that, you have some of these bigger swim baits here that I personally like. Just to throw around, just try to get that bigger fish to commit to those baits.
And not to mention, when you have that dirty water, having the larger tail, the bigger vibration is really going to be able to draw a few more strikes, especially when that water is just really, really muddy.
Right.
But touching back on the slip bobbers too, you know, a lot of pickerel fishing, perch fishing, it gets done from shore. And the true advantage to me with a slip bobber is your casting distance. You don't have a 4 foot, 6 foot, 2 foot leader. It's going to drop all the way down to the jig. So you have a lot of momentum coming in, pushing those baits out. You can cast 2, 3, 4 times further.
Now, touching bases into the yellow perch run, we haven't heard too much about it
not
yet.
Quite.
Especially with this dirty water nowadays. Predicting it will get better as, you know, we get deeper into January, February, obviously. Hopefully this water cleans up fast so we can get back out there and have some more good water quality out there.
Sure.
But for what I've been hearing, it's mainly been on the eastern shore, on some of those creeks like Tuckahoe Creek, Upper Chester River, and down in the Marshy Help area in Federalsburg, which, you know, they're your classic yellow perch spots.
For sure. And going back to fishing minnows for pickerel, you know, we're going to see a lot more yellow perch now. And typically when you're fishing these bigger profiles for pickerel, you're not going to run into too many yellow perch. But when we start fishing the minnows, so typically it's going to start producing a lot more yellow perch in there. So it's not that they're not there. Maybe people just haven't been targeting them over the past couple of months like we have in years prior. Because pickerel fishing's been so good this year. Not too many people have fooled around with the perch.
Right. And then with those same techniques, if you do end up somewhere locally or once again across the bait bridge with this slip bobber or whatever bobber with them in, you can catch all kinds of species in those mill ponds. As we always talk about, crappie, bass, some bigger bluegills. I mean, unlimited options out there once you get to those freshwater lakes around the area here. Especially for you guys up north too that, you know, want to go somewhere and hike and have a good time. Loch Raven.
Yeah,
It's probably one of your better areas to go out there and have some fun.
There's some big fish in there.
Oh yeah, one of my favorite places to fish for anything really.
And they got a lot of everything. And like you said, you know, I think you caught a big trout out of there one time, and you've seen a big bass out of there come out of there on a frequent basis.
And apparently now snakehead.
Snakehead. So touching on snakehead a little bit, now one thing to keep in mind is most of the places that we fish for snakehead are very shallow water fisheries.
Yeah.
So when you have 1 or 2 good warm days in a row, that water warms up really fast. So it's not a terrible idea to still go give it a shot. If you have a 2, 3, 4 day stretch of nice warm water, you can always
But
get
that's the
snake
key.
fishing.
That, you know,
That stretch.
few days of actual warm weather. Not if we get like 1 60-degree day weather, you know, wise. I don't think it will warm up that much.
No,
but
not too much.
like you said, that's the actual focus. It's having multiple days in a row with warm weather, and that's when you see those guys catching those big snakehead this time of the year.
You see a lot of big ones this time.
Especially early spring. But surprisingly enough, you have them all around the creeks too. Personally, I actually caught one myself a couple weeks ago, just pickerel fishing. And like you said, it was when we had those few days of warm weather, and it actually bit my lure. So you never know what you're going to catch out there, that's for sure nowadays. So,
all right, guys.
I think that's all we have for your fishing report, guys. Thank you for tuning in. As always, send us your pictures, send us your reports, and you guys have a good one.
Thank you, guys.